From the vibrant heart of the UAE to every corner of the world, welcome to Season 2 of the International Classroom Podcast. Here, we not only explore education through a global lens, but also celebrate the unique needs, experiences, and perspectives each student brings. In each episode, we bring you insights and discussions from experts and educators around the world. They share their invaluable experiences, the challenges they faced, and the innovative solutions they've championed. So, whether you're an educator, a student, or simply someone with a passion for lifelong learning, we invite you to be part of this journey. Now, before we dive into today's episode, a quick note. Ensure you're following us on your favorite streaming platforms to always stay in the loop. And if you're tuning in via Deep Teaching on YouTube and you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, do us a huge favor, do it now. We've been privileged to host some truly remarkable guests, and your support in sharing and liking these episodes means the world to us. On to the episode.
Yeah, they didn't really do that in real life.
Do they have a clicker?
No, not even. They might have had a board. I think the board that said what the episode number was or something.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking back to when I was hosting kids television. So I did that for 4.5 years. And I think the biggest thing of that, with the clicker or whatever, is just realizing how many people were actually working on a show. And that's what I took for granted when I signed up for it, was that, in most things, you would say yes to someone, like we're doing now. Okay, We'll do a podcast. You got one other person. So, if something didn't go wrong, you're like, and they might kind of let you off the hook. But when you're doing television, you had like 10, 11 people. That was their full-time job. They took it seriously. And they had other episodes to film after yours. So they're on a schedule. Yeah. So it was showing up, and it was action, but knowing that you just had to get things right the first time, or you were kind of letting people down. That was...
How did you actually end up in TV then?
It's a long story, but I'll give you the short one. I moved to Hong Kong in 2006. I went there to be an international educator, so kind of the journey I'm on now again. But then things changed a little bit with my running career. So I partnered with Adidas, and this goes to what we'll speak about probably later about reaching out. So I found out that the Hong Kong record at the time was 31:40 or something for 10K. And my personal best was 31:28. It was faster than the Hong Kong record. So I thought, there's an opportunity here. So I reached out to Nike. I reached out to Adidas in Hong Kong. Adidas gave me a meeting. We chatted about it, and I said, listen, I just need you guys to support me, maybe gear, race entry, transportation on the day of the event, just stuff like that. Okay, that's easy enough. So they supported that, and they were just taking my word for it, basically, and looking online at different races I had done in Canada. Went 2009, won the Standard Charter 10K, so it was about 40,000 Hong Kong athletes, and then myself. And that was quite maybe a good return on their investment. So they started promoting running a lot more and using me as the person to speak about running through. The newspaper was talking about running, magazines were asking about running. They'd say, okay, go talk to Mark. And I transitioned I was doing early years education. I went into grade 1, and one of my parents, of the students that I was teaching, actually owned a English language center for secondary students. And I don't know if you know this in Hong Kong, at one point, they marketed teachers as celebrities. So teachers would be on sides of buses, they'd be on billboards, and secondary students would, when they finished their daily routine, they'd find their favorite tutor, and they would go and they'd pay big money to watch them teach live. And if they didn't have big money, they would go to a screening room. And so a teacher would be teaching up to 5,000, 6,000 students at once, and making, I think at the height of it in 2011, 2010, I think they were covering it on CNN. Some of these guys were making $1 million a year as a English language tutor in Hong Kong. And, I would say celebrity in the sense that students would all know who that person was. If you said, I'm going to go see Mark for this. So he had seen that I was doing running and said, listen, there's a better angle here. Like, yeah, you're in the classroom, you're doing a great job, fair enough, but let's see what else we can do. So took me out of the classroom, I partnered with him, and then suddenly my face was on everything for education. So people saw me for running, people saw me for education, and I was an artist as well. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place. I was in Lang Kwai Fong, if you've been to Hong Kong before. It's a giant bar district called Lang Kwai Fong. And I knew one of the bar owners, and he asked if I could paint a mural on the side of his building. So I was there with an artist named Peter Yule. We were painting this thing, and the head of the TV studio was walking by, and I recognized him, and then we were talking there for a second. He said, "Oh, that's really great." Exchanged numbers, and then about 2 weeks later, I was just thought of, what can I pitch? What is the opportunity here that I can do? And I thought, I watch Chinese dramas a lot, and whenever they speak English, it was I thought there should be someone there helping them. You wouldn't say that. That's a weird thing that they would ask them to say. So I called him up. I said, let's meet. I have an idea here. We sat down. I said, I want to be the English kind of tutor for the TV studio. I think that I'll help all of your artists. If they have English dialogue, I will tell them exactly how it's supposed to sound. I think this is a good gig. And then I thought working at a TV set would be fun. He said, yeah, I don't like that idea, but you should be on TV. You should be teaching kids English. You look like you could do that. And I said, fair enough. And right then and there, he got on the phone, called up the head of the children's department. About 2 months later, I was filming my first episode of Mark Up Your English, a show that had a daily reach of 1 million people within Hong Kong and mainland China. It ran for about 4.5 years. Every single day, Monday to Friday, I became, Mark from Mark Up Your English. And it was all from that idea of reaching out and connecting with people and, not coming empty-handed, thinking about ideas, thinking about your skill sets and being like, no, I can bring something to the table that I think this is cool. And then just being willing to have them say, well, what about that? And then being, okay, yes. And then when I was speaking about, showing up and seeing 10, 11 people, when I showed up, I knew kind of that first episode dialogue. I hadn't really practiced it all that much. And then it was like, oh, this is happening and this is real. And okay, I might have to look at this a little bit differently. But yeah, I think it was amazing. But it just came from a series of kind of reaching out and saying yes, and then the next step, and then the next step, and then the next.
So that kind of goes some way to explain your Twitter handle.
I have a few Twitter handles, but yeah, I think social media and like content creation, we were talking about this before we came on, is something I know you're passionate about just for the sake of just pure enjoyment of creating content. And that's how I view it as well. And I think a few years back when I started Run and Rant, it was just about linking running with, getting some stuff off my chest that no one in my house wanted to hear about, right? So my wife is not in education. Last thing my kids want to hear is something from Mr. Mark, the teacher, when they get home. So go for a run and shout things out that way. And I found, it was just fun making content. And I jump all over social media. I change and I just kind of play it as, what I'm into, whether it's NFTs, whether it's running, or if it's LinkedIn and people are talking about AI or saying something that I don't agree with. I just find it a fun space to kind of play around with things.
Definitely. So I'm curious then with this, because obviously that's a long period of time, TV-wise, in Hong Kong. It's sort of 4.5 years. Were you purely doing that then, or were you actually in the classroom as well?
No, so I left the classroom completely, and I was just writing curriculum for English language centers. So I was still working with the original parent who pulled me out of the classroom. So I was writing curriculum. It was simple, it was just after school, homework-based kind of stuff. We did things. I have a visual art degree, so we offered visual arts classes as well. So I made booklets about how to draw, how to paint at a young age. We did a theater program for students. At the end, we had 13 language centers throughout Hong Kong. So I was doing that. I was running around. Kind of one of the main gigs that a lot of people get when they move to Southeast Asia is like English language teaching in these English language centers. They're not teachers. They come, they're backpackers, they're going around and they say, okay, you can make a little bit of money. You can help kids after school with their English homework. You can kind of guide them through some grammar practices or vocabulary or public speaking. And so I'd go around and just kind of help those teachers and say, this is kind of how you should kind of set it up. And they would use my face for marketing, for branding. And it was pretty nice gig. It was fun.
Were you still running at this time as well?
So yeah, I finished my career, I would say, in 2013. So in 2009, I won the Standard Charter race, and then in 2011, I won that race again. But I think what I didn't realize was how much age will catch up with you. And I'm not even saying that in like a funny way. I actually thought that I would always be fast. I thought I could just do what I've always done. And, you know, you kind of get that expression, you know, like you do what you always done, you're going to get the same result. Well, it's not when age comes into play. And so I could usually train very little and run a sub 33 10K. I could usually do it because I'd always done it. And I kind of took for granted that in college I was running 120 kilometers per week, every week, all the time. And so I had a lot of muscle memory and I had a lot of technique and experience with running. Once I started getting older and started, you know, doing television and having that education on the side and having a social life, and then trying to do running and trying to do it at a very, very competitive level. I think in 2013, I may have come 6th or 7th. And I think it was just a struggle. I remember the race just being like a slog. And I thought, okay, if you're going to keep doing that, you're going to have to prioritize running as a major thing. And I just thought is, okay, maybe that's something that I can do for enjoyment. I can do as an interest of mine. I can help, you know, in school now. I support the triathlon team. I'm the running coach here, but it's not something that I'm going to try to do 120 kilometers a week. It's just
the thought of doing 10 kilometers a week scares me.
It does scare me now too, as well, a little bit. But yeah, so I was running and stuff. But
so what lured you over here then to Abu Dhabi?
It was having my first child. So my daughter Haley, my eldest daughter now, she's 8. Was born on the very, actually 3 days before the end of my TV show. So Mark Up Your English was coming to an end. I was going to have to now pitch new idea for something to do on the TV related to kids programming. And I was picking up my daughter and bringing her home from the hospital. And I thought, okay, this changes it as well, because being an artist, and I say that in Hong Kong, we would classify an artist as someone on television, a music artist, a visual artist, whatever. You can have some flexibility. You can have slow months. You can have good months. You can have months where you're having a cup of noodles or something. It doesn't matter because you're just enjoying that moment. But when you're starting a family, you look at things differently, and you would know this as a father. Everything, your perspective changes and your priorities change. And I thought, okay, you know, this might be a time to go back into international education. I never left education. I was just doing it in completely different lenses. But yeah, so I spoke with my wife, and she actually said, I'd love to go to Dubai. She's big into horse racing. She'd been to the Dubai Cup several times, and not competing, but part of the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And I thought, okay, I'll look within the area, and jumped online, joined one of the teaching kind of recruiting agencies, and there was a gig in Abu Dhabi here at Raha International School for an art teacher. And I have an arts background, and I thought, okay, I'm coming from the performing arts right now. This might be a cool thing, because I was a homeroom teacher initially.
So for those people listening internationally, what's a homeroom teacher?
Internationally, what's a homeroom teacher?
Because I would never refer to it as a homeroom teacher. So just curious what that means to you.
It's just the classroom teacher, going through the day-to-day operations of a class. When you're covering math, you're covering language, you're covering social studies. You're the point of contact, right? You are delivering that core curriculum, and you know, depending on where you are, you probably would have to do the art, maybe, or you would be doing music, PE, all the stuff, right? Depends on where you are. But coming to Abu Dhabi, they had specialists were really cherished, I would say. It's probably maybe not even the right word. But at Raha, there was a lot of specialists, and I found that was a really interesting kind of angle, that you could come here and you could focus on the arts. You could be the art teacher for the primary school. And yes, students would be getting that passion on a daily basis from someone who has a background in the visual arts or the performing arts. So yeah, I thought, okay, this seems like this seems like a cool thing. It seemed a little bit different than, maybe some would think going backwards. Right now you're going back to the classroom. I felt it was just another opportunity. It sounded promising, and yeah, said goodbye to 10 years in Hong Kong like that.
And that was, what, 8 years ago? Was it 2015?
Yeah.
2015. So fast forward to today. What's your current role at Raha School?
So right now I'm the head of specialist for the PYP, the Primary Years Program. So I'm supporting arts, music, PE, and now STEM education in the school, because now we've opened up an innovation hub. And yeah, that's the newest kind of specialist that has emerged in this IB curriculum.
And it's your first year with the STEM side in primary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how's that gone? How's this year been for you?
Well, I think it could have gone a few ways, but it's been extremely successful in the fact that we broke STEM up into two sections. We looked at it as that application, that hands-on makerspace kind of stuff, more looking at an arts scope and sequence. So what are the learning outcomes within the visual arts room that probably we could make a little bit more hands-on, a little bit bigger in a space like this? And that's kind of where I jumped in. I'm kind of that makerspace hands-on artist. We pulled the teacher, head of tech for the primary, also up into this space and said, okay, your main role is to look at where science, math, and language are kind of where they're going in each of the grade levels, and find where is the kind of that sweet spot that we could connect. So we got 6 weeks. What kind of project could we do that is allowing them to really get hands-on, that unpack the art scope and sequence, but then has a science element, or then has a math element, or maybe has a language element, and doing that all through the design process. So having another educator who was coming in with that mindset, so they could really go and make those connections with us in school and talk to the head of science, talk to the head of language, be like, what's going on right now? Like, where's the best place for us to connect? I think that was the best kind of piece. Not having two very similar people who, maybe in a space like this, you would think you would get kind of a couple science and math people, get them up here and they'd be working head on. I think having educators that looked at things differently, but then were able to support to create something a little bit unique, I would say.
Yeah, I find that take really interesting, because I was listening to a podcast on the way over, and he was actually talking about De Bono's hats. In terms of obviously the different hats we wear, and we go through our life with that hat on. So for you yourself, you might always look at things from an artistic point of view, and STEAM and STEM here in the UAE is a big thing, isn't it? It's one of those driving things. It's on like national agendas in terms of to incorporate and deliver and elaborate around those skill sets for it. And most of the time, from my experience, it's like, right, find the science teachers. Just go and find the science teachers, because they're the ones that can tie it into the curriculum and what they do in science. And it limits then obviously what students get to look at and how they do it. And from what you're saying is actually from an artistic point of view, and then potentially with a science or a maths point of view, what you've been able to do is actually really diversify the experience the students get at primary to develop those skills and engage with activities that tie into a curriculum. So for people out there listening, if you were going to offer, let's say, your top 3 tips for this, because loads of people are interested, and I get asked about it all the time, like from starting up, from what you've learned from this year, what would be your 3 key takeaways for that?
I would say you need a space. All right, number one, I think that is, we've had people in the Innovation Hub from other schools within the UAE, and they kind of say, okay, where could we do this, right? And you could start small. We could look at space within classrooms, but you need to allocate a space that allows students to apply. So it's great. You can learn about something. You can learn about buoyancy in the classroom. You can learn all about it. You can watch a video about it, but you have to allow the students to get hands-on and test those things. And they need to have that ability to look at different materials, different methods for how they're going to go. They have to go through that design cycle. They have to fail. They have to retest. They have to imagine. They have to ask different questions. So find a space. And if you have a space where that can happen and that can get messy and you can build up your resources, that's been amazing here. So having a space within Raha has been, I would say, number one for making this happen. And I think it showed the students that we care about it. We weren't tucking it away on a cart and rolling out our, okay, it's time for innovation, like, all right. we said, no, like we value this and we're going to bring you along the journey. The second thing would be making that connection with the students, bringing them into developing that space. So here at Raha, everything you see basically in this big messy room is linked and incorporated with the kids. So they have boxes at home, they're bringing them in. They cleaning out their plastic bottles from their milk cartons to whatever, they're bringing them in. Can we use this? Do you think this is useful? Mr. Mark, can we use these things? Sort it out, put it in a space that you think so that we can all access it when we need it, and we probably could use it. You know, those are probably going to be valuable, and then they feel they're part of that. So not only do they see a space that is focused for innovation or for STEM, they're now part of that team of building it. And the third thing is the people. You need to get those people, and not just reaching out and saying, okay, who's our head of science, like you were saying, or do we have a tech integration person here? Like, you'd be perfect. Can we just give you more responsibility? Yeah. You know, like when you're really good at something and then you end up getting 10 more jobs because of it.
Yeah.
Open it up and say, listen, we want to have a space that is allowing students to apply and inquire and become, you know, and view themselves, especially young girls at a really young age, as engineers, as people that are in the sciences, that are in the maths, that they can look at themselves through that lens at 6, 7 years old. And when we see them down the road when they're graduating DP, how did this come up? It's always been. They would always view themselves as being someone who could do these things. So find the people who would say, do you want to be part of that? Because just like you were saying with putting on those different hats, the space will look drastically different depending on who you put in the room. But if the people come into the space with an open mind about connecting to the curriculum and making things meaningful for students, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
it's about that. So space, join up those students, get the right people.
So talking then about obviously hats, and you mentioned earlier about sort of reaching out and asking those questions. You're someone who's kind of quite open and coming forward, as we would say. Did that have anything to do with your ability to form that relationship with the Louvre here in Abu Dhabi? So
when it came to making partnerships, whether it was with the Louvre, Manor Al Saadiyat, SeaWorld, Department of Tourism, it's seeing our role as educators as one to benefit our students. And I think far too often we look at international jobs in the Middle East as a way to benefit ourselves. And so we look at, you know, what time do we get off work? What does the climate look like? How quickly can we travel? How much money can you save at the end of the day? All those things, completely relevant, completely great. But if you look around, there are amazing resources within our communities that want to support students. It's on their agenda. They have education departments. They want people, like they are constantly trying to reach out to schools, but it's not getting to your email or my email because they don't have unlimited emails. It's arriving at marketing, or it's arriving
HR,
HR,
admissions,
it's kind of sitting there, and maybe the school has someone. Their position is stakeholders. Most probably don't. And so I took it on myself to say, okay, listen, I'm passionate about the arts. I go to the Louvre. My kids go to the Louvre. But why do we have units of inquiry that are related to how we express ourselves that are not directly linked and partnered with people in the community that would know more than us, or equally, you know? So, you know, we're looking at now sharing the planet, and I'm pushing for the marine biologists at SeaWorld to help us develop those units. Because if we're doing sharing the planet, there's nobody better right now than the people at SeaWorld trying to set that up, because that's on their agenda. And they're talking about that, and they're trying to communicate that with the public. So if they're trying to do it, and we're trying to do it, then we need to make those partnerships. So it's just about reaching out. And I did that in lots of different ways. And I think the biggest one would just be saying yes, you know, and it kind of goes to, you know, saying yes because I was a runner and stepping out of the classroom, saying yes because I was doing graffiti on the side of a bar in Hong Kong to go have an interview, to whatever. It was going to Manor Al Saadiyat. We need some people to come help and facilitate to create some activities for this new workshop that's going up. Okay, I like the arts. I am an educator. I'll go check that out. It allows me to meet more people within the community. You're chatting with someone, what do you do? Well, yeah, I work here, whatever. They end up going to work for the Louvre, and okay, and now I'm working at the education department at the Louvre. Amazing. And what's on your kind of agenda? We need to get more students. We need more student voice at the Louvre. This was a conversation I had with them, I would say back in 2017. We want student voice at the Louvre. Amazing. What else? What do you need? Well, we need like 30 students to come, and we need them to walk through the gallery space. We need them to tell us that the work that they connect with. We need to hear their kind of understanding how they connect with the work. We need to allow them to videotape it so that we can show it to other schools. And it turned to be a massive project, and I was there having that conversation alongside them. So I think it's just that. It's like, get out, say yes, and if you keep your students in mind about how this is going to benefit them and bring them along that journey, then, the world's your oyster, especially the UAE.
Yeah, there are so many opportunities, like you've mentioned already, in terms, you've already got me thinking about, let's say, for example, we've got the Museum of the Future in Dubai. Like, I've not even been there yet.
Right.
Because every time I look at books, like it's a month in advance, there's this.
Yeah.
But surely there must be something, like, someone's just going to hear this and probably go, I'll do the same now, which is great. But I'm thinking, right, I could reach out to them. There must be some part or something there that could tie in about futurism or ties into our STEM or STEAM ideas. It is that, isn't it? It's taking those opportunities. But you made an interesting point about international teaching in terms of what people are out here for, from the initial to that middle to the long. And you're kind of a long-standing international teacher. Is that, am I moving to develop my teaching, or am I moving for myself? And I think listening to it from the aim of the podcast being about the international classroom, is the balance of that actually is hard to get right, isn't it? There are a lot of teachers who come out originally who are more probably 80-20. Like 80% Dubai, it's money, it's weather, it's travel.
Yeah.
And I've spoke about this from other co-hosts in terms of the 3 Ds about debt, divorce, and drink.
Okay.
I think he said, like, in terms of those things that can come into it. But that balance to get right is really hard, isn't it? In terms of making sure you want to develop yourself as an educator, because as you've already said, there are so much scope for it here. And what you've really hit the nail on the head there is just about networking. Is about reaching out to teachers or individuals or businesses or parents, because we've got a real wealth of parents in the school who did so many different things. And we want to try and encourage more teachers to do it, don't we?
Well, it comes from a place of being authentic. So I wouldn't worry about, saying an idea now and then 50 other educators going and reaching out to SeaWorld and saying blah, 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 blah. Because if it's not coming from a place where you're authentically part of a conversation, then it doesn't move as fast, right? We're doing this podcast together, not because we met last week. We've known each other for, I would say, a long time through social media, and then at conferences, having a chat back and forth. You'll write something on LinkedIn or somewhere that I don't agree with, and I'll write some comment. I'm not sure that's happened, but I'm pretty sure. I do enough of it. But having those relationships are what lead to having different conversations, right? And, if you're looking at, the Museum of the Future, and I'm sure they have people on LinkedIn who are sharing what they're doing and like the things that they're trying to get across. And, people go and post, that's actually cool. That actually links with something I'm doing in my classroom. Let me do it. And then I'm going to tag you on it later, right? And they say, like, oh, that's cool. And then, I think we are going to have a field trip there in 6 weeks' time or something. And if you're around, like, maybe you could say hi and maybe not. It's about making those connections that are benefiting the students that you're passionate about, but that are authentic. Yeah. And I think when people do it that way, then, great things can happen. Because the things that people, I would say, push against the most on networking through social media are those cold kind of calls. Kind of like, boom, I'm Mark from Raha, da-da-da. Like, maybe it works, but usually it's a lot better to just kind of slowly get your feet in the water and kind of say, hey, I care about this. My students care about this. And I'm here, and I'm going to be listening to the journey.
It's authenticity and value, isn't it? And again, a lot of the podcasts, near enough all the podcasts I listen to are non-educational based.
Right.
So I'm aware of others, but it's more like business and people development. And it's that, isn't it? It's of value. What value? I know what value I'm going to get from you if you let me come in, but what value are you going to get from me?
Right.
And that's, I think, for teachers, is you've got to identify that and go, look, let's work in this as a partnership because I know you're going to give me this and access to this, and this is what I can do for you. And it sounds very much like you've kind of got that nailed down.
Well, I would say I don't have it nailed down, but I would have a thick skin in the sense that I don't go to things with expectations. Like I'm looking for opportunities that will benefit the Innovation Hub, that will benefit my professional development as an educator. And I know if I did link up, whether it was Maritime Heritage Festival, the Al Hosn Festival here in Abu Dhabi, those things are going to bring me closer to the culture. And then those things are going to benefit my students here at Raha. And sometimes they'll say, no, there's nothing. Like right now isn't really a fit, but like we appreciate like the response to our content or resharing something or engaging in something or going down and checking something out. But you just have to just roll with it. And I think if people are willing to do that and not kind of take offense to if someone doesn't want to do something initially, then again, great things will happen. So
yeah, persistence, isn't it? In terms of just go, well, when you've got something, come back to me, or you know what, I'll reach back out in a couple of months.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
We'll see what's available then. So no, I think that's really good advice, and actually things that teachers here can learn from and should be looking to take up with the new year ahead of us.
Teachers need to take a moment, and I know teachers don't like to be preached to, especially from another teacher. But you have to take your professional development, you have to take your career into your own hands. People do it in every other profession. Yeah. They don't sit back and wait for everything to be laid out in front of them and then have people come across and say, wow, look at the collaborations you've created. Wow, look at how much knowledge you now have in STEM or in AI or whatever it is. You have to go out and get some of that stuff. And when people see you going out and being proactive, then a lot of those other things start coming. And schools then maybe support you a little bit more, or you find you're being sent to more conferences or doing stuff. So it's being about being a little more proactive.
Yeah, and you are not the first guest on the podcast to say that. From facilitators to course leaders have all said about our industry, our profession as teachers, that we are not given enough practice time. We're not giving that time to actually develop and source our own development and put these things into practice in a low pressure environment. And I've written myself about it as well, and even from a sports background.
Right.
I would say, like, I came from rugby and most sports, but rugby was my predominant one, and rugby or cricket. And you spent the majority of your time practicing, ready to perform for a couple of hours on a weekend, and that was it. And I said, our profession is you perform 20 hours, 26, 27 hours a week with maybe 1 hour to practice and everything else that comes on top of that. And I think our profession then is kind of in the wrong way. It's skewed, and therefore the people that come into it are skewed with it. It was interesting, again, going to another podcast, the same podcast, but talking about it in terms of the impact that the B-leaguers and the A-leaguers have on performance, and how it said that if you surround yourself with the type of people like you and people that want to do that, the high performers, the A stars, the A characters, it's like your performance goes up by 15%. Whereas if you are surrounding yourself with underperformers, the B-leaguers, those ones they classified as, it goes down by 30%. Right. This is statistically researched and proven. And even goes into this, there's the research, it's called Aging Gracefully, I think it was called. And they looked at nuns in terms of longevity of life, and they said 50% of these nuns that were living to 89, 90 years old had something to do with their beliefs and their values and morals and that. But he said the other 50% of it was down to the fact that these were lifelong learners, that they actually kept their brain active. And it goes to show that the primary use of your brain is for your movement of body. And it's interesting when we kind of go, I stop moving, or injuries, or you give up on your sports, or things like that. It's like your movement decreases, that your cognitive functioning can also start to decrease. So with these nuns were active and moving, and they kept their brain active as well. And it kind of just echoes with what you're saying about taking ownership of your professional learning in terms of don't just settle for the habits or doing things that you've always done, or this is the way it's always done. Habits or habitual nature of teaching in the same way actually leads to a decrease, in cognition and student performance. Actually take on board more learning opportunities and take yourself out of your comfort zone actually is going to have a huge impact on your development and your enjoyment, I think, of teaching. Because once you've been doing it for a long time, like you and I, like if I still taught the same way I did when I first started, it was just death by PowerPoint.
Well, I think you need to find those educators in your space, if you're classifying them as A or B or C or however, that are willing to be reflective. And I find that's probably something that my teaching partner Mike and I in this space have done very well, in the sense that we would teach, because we're teaching grade 2 to 5, you'd be teaching the same lesson 3 times, because you'd have 2 groups of students in, and then you'd have 2 groups and 2 groups. And you'd do it once, and you'd sit down and you'd reflect, I saw how that went, but let's think about this next group of students, because they're not the same, and we know the dynamics coming into the next thing. We know, how did that kind of roll over things that we did in that first lesson? And you kind of reflect on it, and then you adapt it and you change it. And you do that within your lessons, but you also do that within, how are we assessing within this room? And you reflect on that. How are we actually communicating with each other during the lesson? How are you notifying me when you're ready to talk, or if I'm going to say something that you're like, no, they're not there yet, or whatever? How can we improve on that? How can we improve how our resources are? How can we improve on getting the students to have more voice within this space? And it's constantly about being reflective. And I think teachers in the homeroom class sometimes forget to reach out and have those conversations. They feel that they're kind of doing it on their own. Even if they have, like a few different members of that same grade level, you have to sit down with people, and people are actually usually pretty keen to have just nice, open conversations about being reflective, about what's been going on. It's not structured. You don't have to write anything down. Just find those moments to chat with your colleagues, and that is one of the strongest professional developments I think you can do as an educator.
Agreed. So tanging off, like reflecting on your year, reflecting on things that you've done at Raha International. One of the big things we want to touch upon then is esports. Because it's starting to come more to the forefront now, and you've been involved in it this year quite heavily. How's that gone for you here?
So I don't think anyone would argue that students are not engaged in the digital space, that they are into gaming, that they're into online spaces, that they're into social media, all these things. And some of them have a place within the school, and some of them not yet. But I'm assuming a lot of those things will creep in more and more. And so as educators, I think we need to provide room for those things to show students that in certain parts we do value those experiences. So this year we decided, we're going to tackle esports. We're going to try to bring that in from the students from grade 2 to grade 5. And we're going to do it in a few ways to see if we can make this successful. Number one, we will find a game, an opportunity that has an easy enough entry point, so that, if you are a really avid gamer, you have a level up, but people can still learn it. They can still catch up. So a game like FIFA or something is not an ideal game to start off initially, because the difference in the skill level could be quite vast right away. And what I felt we didn't want to do was push kids out of the esports thing simply because they didn't have the system at home. So we went for a fairly simple game, Mario Kart, which most adults probably grew up with some version of Mario Kart. I grew up with Mario Kart. I was never really exceptional at it. But what I did love about the game is if you showed up to someone's house, you could play it. And maybe you get lucky and you'd have some good races or you'd have some bad ones, but you weren't getting just annihilated after a while. You kind of knew how the game worked. So allowing kind of that entry point was very important. The second point was taking it slow. So what we did was we found a time. So the way the Innovation Hub works, we teach Monday to Thursday, and then Friday is our duties and our planning day. So we actually have a little bit of flexibility on Friday to kind of pull a small group of students, maybe a class, into this space for 30 minutes and do something related to esports. So we linked how are we gonna pick who comes in and who doesn't, because we want everybody getting used to this. So we linked it with the resources provided by the students to the Innovation Hub. So every day, students will come up and they'll bring cardboard, they'll bring bottles, what have you, and they'll sort it out in our kind of little storage space, and they would write down their class name and they'd put it in a lucky draw. And so every week during the assembly, we'd come on and we'd talk about what was happening in the Innovation Hub. So we used it as a point to kind of reflect back, let them know, okay, yeah, remember we did all these things, and look at all the resources that students have been bringing in, and congratulations to 3KM, we will see you at the Innovation Hub for Mario Kart for 30 minutes. And so we'd find a time on Friday and that group would come in, and we rolled that out with every grade within the primary. And soon enough, students were more than happy to bring in stuff from their house. Their parents were more than happy to allow the recycling to come somewhere where maybe it's actually being recycled or reused. And they kind of had this kind of carrot on the stick kind of thing linked to it. So then we did a small little competition, and we said, okay, let's find our best Mario Karters from grade 2 to grade 5. So we got some students, they set up some kind of timetables when you could show up during break times and have a go, and kind of gave them some, parameters. You should have practiced this course, and this is kind of the time you're looking for, so prepare yourself, and we'll do this in a couple weeks. And the students came grade by grade, and they just raced one lap around the track, and they just, whatever their time was, we just wrote it up. So we had this massive list of all these racers within the school. We took the top grade 2 to grade 5, and again, we brought it back to the assembly. And I think this is really key for bringing esports to a school, is you need to find the moments that are already created to celebrate success. So you don't need to create a Saturday esports tournament where you're going above and beyond. If you have a moment like an assembly where you are highlighting the amazing things that are happening around the school, bring it into that. So we brought it into that. Those students came up onto stage. They saw, wow, we're being celebrated for games. And the students in the audience, we're celebrating gaming. This is now part of what we do at Raha. They raced. Everyone was in it because everyone kind of had a voice. They kind of had their racer from representing their grade. And, in the end, our youngest racer in grade 2, female esports, a lot of amazing things were happening where we said, this is what esports looks like. It's this engagement level. And it's maybe not that older teenage boy that you think is going to win. It's the youngest, and it's the girls. And it was just, incredible. And the students then said, listen, could we make our own esports? Can we do FIFA? And we'll make our own timetable, and we'll make our own system. And so they worked alongside the Innovation Hub, and they got more of a team environment. And again, we let it kind of gradually go out, and we celebrate it there in the assembly. And we didn't have a lot of that pushback about, well, how come you're taking classroom time to play video games? Because you're finding the right moments that allowed for those celebrations to happen that didn't really pull away from those, crucial kind of experiences where they say, you couldn't do it during innovation lessons, right? Because they would be saying, oh, it's not what we expected to happen in the space. So it's finding that right time within the timetable, doing it gradually, making it accessible, and then having that moment that can really highlight that success. And I couldn't have asked for a better year of intro to esports. I think everyone saw the engagement of the students. The teachers saw, wow, this has a little bit more value than maybe we thought. And, you kind of see those faces of the kids who are up there and the kids who are cheering them on. And you say, it's hard to push against something like this.
So what does the future of esports at Raha look like for next year?
So in the primary, we're still going to do it in-house, I would say, with the same thing connected to the Innovation Hub. Introduce different games. I want to see different kind of, just as a gamer myself now, I would say, just how different games can kind of be played and which ones are successful, which ones are not. Highlight those things in the assembly. But the secondary is now going to be branching off into esports, I think, in a more competitive way. We're going to be actually developing teams within Raha that will go and compete against teams within the region, linking up with companies that actually have more of an experience on this kind of stuff when it's linking to, proper tournament-based esports. And I think that's goes back to that collaboration element and that dialogue, right? You post things slowly on social media or wherever, and you let people know, hey, this is what's happening. I'm trying this esports thing. It's kind of cool. And then people who have a lot of experience will reach out and say, well, actually, we do this, this, and this. And you say, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not right for my kids right now, but it's right for someone else within the school. But at least people within the school can see that we value it. And it's creating that value at the beginning. And then, watching it grow has been amazing. And I'm certain esports will have a representation in every school, every major international school in the UAE here in the next couple of years. I would be shocked if in a couple of years I said, how many esports guys are you sending to the F1, whatever, or everyone would have some kind of link to it.
Agree with that. And that just shows the changing landscape with technology as well. And that being said, thinking again just about the future and everything you've got going on here, how do you think, or how do you plan, that to be the right word, how do you plan to keep sort of the innovation hub that you've got here in this makerspace? What are your plans for it for the next couple of years? How do you see the technology impacting what you offer here?
I'm not worried too much about the technology within the space too much. I think, I'm open for opportunities to see what's out there and how I can link it with the curriculum, whether that's ChatGPT if we're doing our research element, or, whether we're getting more into coding, Scratch. We launched Scratch Junior. We did a little bit of Scratch here. But I think the biggest thing is the Innovation Hub will be collaborating more with the community. So within the IB, you have 6 units of inquiry. Those need to have partner links. I would say almost every one of them. So if you're doing something in the Innovation Hub and it has some kind of linked with space, then I would say you are reaching out to the UAE space program. You are making a connection and you're saying, listen, this is what we're going to try to unpack. What would be some questions that you think the students should be asking? And if they ask those questions, could they send them to someone? I'm just making this up. But I would wish that every unit that we go into has a community collaborative element to it, and guest speakers in, and the space is just it's just alive and growing, and a very reflective one where you kind of look at it and say, okay, that was amazing. How can we do it differently? How can we change it? And there'll be tech that will improve it, and there'll be tech that will say, oh, that was maybe not worth the squeeze. But
you got to try it though, haven't you?
Yeah,
that's the thing. When we talk about being reflective, when we talk about professional development, it's like, I know one of the IB programs, be a risk taker.
Yeah.
I think if we can model that for our students as well, and model it for the teachers to see, then we can also be honest enough to go, you know what, I'm glad I took that risk, that worked, or you know what, that really didn't work, but actually if we did this instead, maybe we'll get a different outcome.
Yeah, and I think we need to be transparent with our students as well, that maybe some of those units, some of those partnerships, actually the main thing that you're trying to get them to understand is being a risk taker. It's not something that you're identifying, hey, you're being a risk taker right there. It's not like a trait that you see within the student. That's what the unit is about. Yeah. And you say, like, listen, we have not done this before. We are linking up with X, Y, and Z outside of school. We're going to have to do this. This is what our summative is going to look like. This is a risk. We are going to, as a group, see how well this can pan out. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity with that. So
that's amazing. Insight on this, and just sort of we're drawing this to a close, but obviously the insight and everything you're doing here is phenomenal. Anyone listening and watching, in terms of being inspired or just in terms of motivated to go out and try new things. But I'm really interested to wrap it up in terms of, you've obviously worked in different contexts across multiple parts of the world, international education. Where do you think international education is going in the future?
I would say I would lean towards it going more towards the IB type of curriculum, in the sense that I think, content, knowledge, it's out there. You can go and get everything you need to get online. Soon enough, when you're asking students to give you a paper on X, Y, and Z, they'll be able to ask an advanced version of some AI program to make the PowerPoint, to make the presentation, to do the work. And we have to realize that this is going to be the world that the students live in. And what I love about the IB is that it's looking at how you then present that knowledge. It's looking at the questions that you ask, why you're doing something. And I think I'm constantly having those conversations with the students that, everything isn't so prescribed from A to Z. This is what the assignment looks like. This is the summative, and this is how you get scored on it. You need to look at what it is, that central idea. If I'm looking at a unit of inquiry, what are we trying to prove? Use these lines of inquiry and try to figure out that this is actually a true statement or not. And you're going to show me that in a meaningful way. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that in international schools. We're going to have students expressing their understandings in authentic ways, whether that's allowing them to do it through the visual arts, through the performing arts, through something they create in an innovation hub. I think it's going to be a lot more collaborative within the school environment. And if you looked at something like the celebration of the PYP exhibition that grade 5s have, where they take kind of a topic and they authentically research it and express it in a meaningful way, that's what learning is going to be about, but all the time. That you'll be having to dive into something and explore it in some way that you can show that you actually connect with that content and it's not from somewhere else, because just delivering the answer is no longer going to be relevant. And yeah, I think IB has placed themselves in a good spot for that, not intentionally maybe, for the idea of this AI rollout here that's kind of going faster than maybe anyone expected. But it's going to be a place where students need to authentically express their knowledge in meaningful ways. And I think the PYP is a good spot for that.
Big advocate for it.
Yeah.
And we talked about a lot of different things today. But what is one thing we've potentially missed? What is one thing we haven't talked about that you think is important?
No, I think we chatted a little bit before the podcast, and we were saying, what are some ideas? And I like that we didn't overly think about what it is that we wanted to chat about, and therefore, or at least I didn't look at it too carefully, so that we could have just a chat back and forth. I think something that I don't think we've missed, but that needs to be really kind of looked at is kind of the why of the educator in the international scene. The why are there so few, and maybe there's not few, but so it seems to me few people reaching out in really creative ways to express what's going on in their schools, creative ways to increase their own professional development, creative ways to connect with people in their community. Why is that not happening more? And we need it to happen more. People need to be, you should be like, your list for people to chat with on the podcast should be endless, because there's amazing people in the UAE doing amazing things, and they have to somehow, we have to tap into that. So I think that's going to be one of your roles and responsibilities, I guess, is to
just pushing it on to me,
is to find those people and to get those things out, because that's how we grow. And being part of a company like Talim with so many schools, I'm always chatting, whether it's with Alan or Glenn or whoever at head office, and saying like, how do we, and we had these conversations, how do we get this wealth of knowledge working together? And it can't be in this singular little TED Talk event that we do here or that. We have to create a way that collaboration is celebrated within these education companies and these groups and these schools. And people need to know that their voices matter, and that the things that they're doing in their classrooms probably are really amazing, and people need to hear about it. And that, I don't know if we need to shelf this idea of that's being kind of, that you're showing off or that you're speaking too loud. And you don't need to post as much as I do on LinkedIn, fair enough. But we need to hear your voices. So if that could spark anyone that's listening now to be reflective, share something with that person next door to you in your classroom. Share something that's really awesome with your PYP coordinator. Share it, ask your HR to come and take a photo of some cool project that's happening. You can allow the other people to share it out, but we have to find out what's going on so that we can all get better together.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's a Really good thought and a perfect way to end. And yeah, we'll see what I can do podcast-wise guest list next year. So, but yeah, Mark, really, thank you ever so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting us down into your makerspace as well.
Good.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
I have a broom and a little bit. I know you agreed to clean it up with me here at the end of the year. So
that was it. That was the deal.
That was the deal. Thank you for that, huh?
Thanks ever so
Cheers.
much.